Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Studio 78 podcast. I am your host, Nache from NachesNow.com. Welcome. It is Memorial Day weekend, and I want to give a special shout out and thanks to everyone who has served or who is serving and who will serve. I appreciate all you do for this country, and I just want you to know I appreciate you. Thank you. All right, you guys. So today we have Tafy LaPlanche. She is a portrait artist. And it's interesting. She's the third artist that I've had on this season. And artist, she will be the last, at least for this season. I have a few other people lined up that are in different industries, creative industries. They are wonderful. But she is kind of rounding up my artists for this season. And if you haven't listened to the other episodes this season, check out Justine in 124. She's a great example of how you can make beautiful art and sell art while still maintaining a 9-to-5. And then if you go to episode 127 with Marcella, she will talk about creating art full-time and opening up a brick and mortar store and teaching courses. And now I have on Tafy LaPlanche, and she is just getting started with her art career. So I just love how I've covered different aspects of art because I feel like I have a decent number of creators out there, even if you're not doing traditional painting, that will appreciate the variety of artists that I've brought on this season. And so for Tafy, I loved interviewing her because it was interesting to hear her story about how she evolved as an artist from when she was 13, and she'll talk to you about how she got started, to an experience in Tuscany that allowed her to really figure out like what her style and her subjects were going to be, to what she's, doing now and how she's doing it and how she's marketing herself and pricing herself. So it was just really good to chat with her about all the things, and I think you will find her story interesting as you're maybe driving home from vacation this Memorial weekend. Now, if you want to go to the show notes for this page, because Tafy does at the end of the episode give her favorite tools, you can go to nachesnow.com/131. Okay, if you love this episode, please remember to give it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts real quick. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. Wherever you're listening, please subscribe, and sharing is caring, my friends. If you think this will inspire someone you love, please share away. Okay, let's jump in. Hello, Tafy, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
So glad to have you on and dig into your story. But, before we get into where you are now, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about your background?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been doing portrait art for a couple of years now. I just recently started doing painting basically at the beginning of the pandemic. I used to do landscape painting when I was younger, and I did it because, one, I just was good at it, and two, my dad's Haitian. He thought that doing landscape paintings would be a good gateway into becoming a Haitian artist. He was like, a lot of Haitian painters do market painting and like use the same colors that you do, and you're Haitian and you can really become, this really great Haitian painter. And just anytime a parent tells you to do something at a young age, you're not going to do it, okay? It's just going to be one of those things where you're just like my dad told me to do it, so I'm not going to do it.
Right.
So I was doing these landscape paintings, and I was just bored out of my mind. And I got this opportunity to go paint in Tuscany for a pre-college program for landscape painting. And I kind of was like, you know what? Maybe just to change the scenery will change my mind about this because I do love painting. I'm just not enjoying what I'm painting.
Mm.
So I had went to Tuscany, found this beautiful sunflower field, set up my canvas, got my paints out, all this stuff, right? Looking across, it's beauty everywhere. Like it's hard not to be inspired.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, like before I even get my paintbrush on the canvas, I start hearing like bzz, bzz, bzz,
Mm-mm.
bzz, and
Mm-mm.
like, and I'm a city girl, so I was just like, no. So I'm swatting like my hands everywhere like some crazy maniac because I'm just like, get this sound away from me. So all of a sudden, the buzzing stops, and I'm like, okay, great. So I go back to look out into the sunflower field, and I can't see anything. Like everything is just like very blurry, and I just like I anything that was close to me I could see, but anything that was like far was very just out of whack. And I was like, oh my,
Oh.
what happened? So apparently, I'm allergic to bees.
Oh.
Stung like it stung my yeah, it stung my right eyelid and it blew up. So that's what happened. So here I am, like, oh great, like I'm in I'm in Italy on a hill,
Mm-mm.
just stung by a bee, and luckily, like this elderly woman kind of emerges from the top of the hill, right? Like in my time of need, she just emerges. And don't worry, guys, this is very much a part of my art story. So she emerges from the hill and she sees what happened, and she's kind of like, "Oh, you got stung by a bee," and I'm just like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Here, like come to my house. I have something that can help get rid of the bump on your eye." And I'm just like, she's old. She's from Italy. She must have some home remedy, right? Like,
Oh goodness, this is a risk.
not that I'm this young American from Italy, don't know this. I'm just like, oh yeah, like she's old and like European, so let me trust her. So I follow her to her house, and she like lives on this small farm. And she sits me down. She cuts an onion in half and tells me to put half the onion on my eye. Now
Oh, that just seems like it's gonna make it worse. Like tears are gonna
right?
be coming down.
I'm thinking, okay, is she just making fun of some American girl, or is this like really helpful? And I'm thinking, okay, maybe the tears help me like cry the venom out. Like I've heard if you rub vinegar on it, like that helps too. But anyway, so I just go along with it because at this point, like what am I gonna do? Like look for the green pharmacy cross in the middle of a Tuscany farm and hope they have Benadryl? No. So I put the onion on my eye. I have this onion on my eye. I'm crying. But she just goes about her day. She just cooks in her kitchen, like talks to her family. There's these chickens running around that she's communicating with them. I guess they're like her pets or her food, maybe, who knows. But she just is interacting with everything. And me sitting there kind of was just like, wow, I am really inspired by just the events that just happened, but also just seeing her in her space and just being herself. That to me, just kind of like light bulb went off, and I was just like, I shouldn't be painting landscapes. I should be painting people and what people are about and how
Mm.
they perceive themselves, but also how others perceive them as well. Because I'm like, I don't know this lady, but she's just doing her own thing. And it's what ended up driving me toward the end. So yeah, I went from landscape painting, and it took a bee to just sting me to realize that I wasn't on the path that I was supposed to be on. And that's right.
Sometimes it takes nature to put you on the right path. I mean, it sucks it had to
Sometimes,
be a bee though, but
you know, sometimes it's a kick in the butt, sometimes it's a sting in the eye.
yeah. I'm sure, like, so, while still there, did you just start painting people versus focusing on the landscapes?
Yeah, okay. So the program was for landscapes, right? Um,
Right.
and so I did it because I had to, but like on the side, I was sketching the other people who were part of the program.
Mm.
Um, or like anytime we went somewhere, I would just doodle like people's faces and stuff that I had saw. And that's what really kind of just put me on this whole path of drawing people through my travels, especially with, because when I first started drawing, my mom had put me in this school that only spoke Mandarin. And I don't know where she found this class. I think she was just looking for the cheapest art school that she can put me in,
Mm.
and just happened to find like this like Mandarin course that taught art. And so while I was there, no one spoke a lick of English. I think like the only English word that they eventually learned how to say was hello. And in turn, like I learned how to say ni hao. But that literally was it. Like that was our communication with each other. But I still ended up learning something from that. Like I was there for 4 years, just learning how to draw, learning how to paint, and I realized how much art in itself was this universal language
Mm.
that kind of connected us all. And I didn't even have to know like anything about you. But I
Yeah.
was still able to perceive like your emotions and your soul and capture that in a drawing or a painting, and then have someone else look at it who's never met you before and understand the same thing I was understanding when I was in front of you and didn't even speak a word to you.
Mm. I mean, that it does say something about the power of art, right? Because you were still able to pick up techniques and learn from others, share your techniques with others without really even saying a word.
Yeah, it was crazy. But it was something that I didn't know I was doing all of that when I was doing it
Mm.
until I went into the landscapes and then had the bee thing and all that stuff. It didn't really connect to me until I sat down and just was watching her do her thing, where I was
Mm.
like, oh shoot, this is how I started. This has always
This
been
is
something
the
within me. Let me stop ignoring that part of me and get on it. So,
wow. So what happened after that? Did you say, okay, I know that I'm gonna go to school for the arts, like this is going to be my thing, or was it still something maybe that was kind of like in the background, but you didn't know if it would be your thing?
no, it definitely was like, I was very adamant about it because I was like, yeah, it was during the process of me like applying to colleges and whatnot. So when I got accepted into colleges, I wanted my major to be painting because I kind of knew how to paint, but I didn't know how to paint like people. And that's like a whole different thing. So I was trying to figure
Hmm.
out classes that I needed to take and learn and all that stuff. But I knew that painting was the major that I wanted to do. During college, I still didn't really paint portraits. Like
Oh.
I I was learning how to like I did a lot of figure work. So I was learning how to like mix the proper colors and all that kind of stuff. But I was also trying to get a little out of my bubble of doing like realistic work and stuff like that. I was applying all those techniques, but for different things, because I was just testing things out. And then I backed up away from it because then I was focusing on photography more.
Mm.
So it
Yeah.
was, like it was still in the back of my mind, but I think I kind of once I knew that's what I wanted to do, I wanted it to be perfect. And I was so afraid to mess up. But you kind of
Hmm.
have to, if you don't try, you're just never going to do it, right? And then you're just
Yeah.
not going to have anything. So that was me for years. That was me from, yeah, basically from college until like March of last year was me just being like, this is something I want to do, but like I just don't
How
feel
do
like my
I?
like there yet. So I stuck to drawing is what I did. I just did a lot of portrait drawing, which I still love to this day because
Mm.
it's my core. So I love just doing like a charcoal portrait or doing things in graphite
Mm.
and really kind of understanding like the anatomy of a face and getting expressions down and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
And I appreciate the fact that I did step away a little bit from doing portrait painting throughout those years until now because now I don't have all these preemptive thoughts that hold me back when
Mm.
it comes to doing portrait paintings. Now I don't mind that if it's not as detailed as my works are. Because at the end of the day, I can look back at those works and be like, I still have this skill and I
Right.
can do this, but my paintings are more me just being free and being creative and still doing that like core of getting a person's like personality and soul captured
Mm-hmm.
just way. Now it's just more in the way that I just naturally do it versus trying to concentrate so much on getting all the technical stuff down. And every once in a while, we'll go back and add little technical things to it because that's still a part of my style. But I don't let it drive me now.
Right. So that's interesting. So at what point, I mean, because it sounded like last year something changed, right before the pandemic or right when the pandemic started. And
Yeah.
so what was that change and what did that look like?
Oh my gosh. So well, as people just got bored of being home, right? Looking for courses of learning a new skill and all this kind of stuff. And my boyfriend's mom was learning how to refurbish old furniture.
Oh,
And so there was this store that she wanted to go to because they did classes and that sort of stuff. And then downstairs, they sold old furniture pieces that you can put back together and make something out of it. So we went out to the store, and the store itself had 3 floors. So the main floor was an antique vintage shop. So they just had a bunch of stuff that you can, buy and whatnot. The bottom floor, which was all the refurbished furniture parts, and then the top floor was studio spaces. So I'm the type of person that like when I go into the store, I look at everything. I'm very much a quester. Like I'll open doors and like look behind things, especially in an antique store because some good things are just hidden away.
they're tucked
Some are just
away.
like
Yeah.
I was kind of burying myself in places. So I went upstairs and I noticed all these studios, and half of them were occupied and half of them were just empty.
Mm.
And I was trying to figure out if it was workspaces for people who were selling things downstairs or if it was like legit studio spaces. And I remembered seeing one and kind of just being like, oh man, like I miss having my studio space back in college and like waking up in the morning and not having like noise and just kind of like really focusing on this and not having to
Mm-hmm.
worry about the smell of like turpentine and linseed oil in a New York City apartment and getting sick off of that and no air circulation. And like all these thoughts were kind of just rushing back. And I stood there for a good couple of minutes and was just like, wow. I was like, what stopped me from doing my art? Because there was just a
Mm.
time where I really wasn't doing anything. And I was like, I think it was just having the space that I felt comfortable enough in to create. And
Mm.
I was like, here's a space right here in front of me, right? So I was like, let me go and inquire about it and just kind of see if it's doable.
Mm. Yeah.
So I went upstairs and I inquired about it. And yeah, they were like, here are the spaces that are currently empty. You can do whatever art that you want to do in the space. You're not contracted to make anything for the store. If you want to, that's like a separate thing, but you're allowed to just make what you want to make in the space. And I was just
Very
like,
cool.
okay. And I saw the price and I thought the price was more than reasonable. It was like a teeny tiny corner, but at least it was still just
It'd be your corner.
yeah, it was my corner and it was like private enough for me. Like it had a door, I could shut it in. And they were like, you can come into the studio space anytime you want, but it is still a store. So like during store hours, like people will come in and out and whatnot. And it's up to you if you want to leave your door open or if you want to leave your door closed. And I had this whole notion that, oh, I'm going to leave it open all the time. And like, so people can come in and whatnot. And then I just realized this is the first time I finally had a space for myself.
You're like,
Uh,
and people are nosy too. They'd be like, "Oh, so
oh,
what are you working on there?"
yeah.
You're like,
Yeah, and also it was like the start of the pandemic too, and I didn't really
oh,
want, especially in a
right.
small corner. I was like, I don't want people in here. So I kept my door closed most of the time, but it was like it really gave me the space to just unlock that part of myself that I think was hiding for
Mm.
so long. And it wasn't until I just painted something where I was just like, yeah, I'm a painter. What am I doing? I painted I had painted I officially painted like my first portrait painting there because again, I wasn't really
Wow.
doing portrait paintings. So I painted my first portrait painting there. And then 2 weeks after I did it, a gallery hit me up and asked if I wanted to be a part of a group show.
Mm.
And I was just like, oh, look at me already. Like,
And how did they see your stuff? Were you posting it on Instagram,
um,
Facebook?
I was posting it on Instagram.
Yeah.
I was just like my one and only like art piece. I was just like really
Like
putting it
one
out
post.
there.
Right.
Yeah.
But someone saw it.
So yeah, this gallery reached out, asked if I wanted to be a part of the group show, and I did like my research and whatnot because I never was approached on Instagram about things like that before.
Mm.
So I was like, who are you guys? It was like a legit art gallery. A friend of mine had been in their art gallery before too. So yeah, put my art in the gallery, and then 3 days later it sold. And I was just like, okay.
Wow.
Once that happens, now you're kind of like, oh, okay, like I could do this.
Like, wait a
Yeah,
minute.
like I'm like,
Someone bought
oh,
this
like
for some money
yeah. I'm
in the
like,
gallery.
in a gallery. And it's like they always tell you that your first sale is always relatively easy. It's the
It's
after
all
that
the
that's not so
subsequences.
not so easy. And I learned that very quickly. Because it's like, oh, who's this like up and coming artist? And then it's like, okay, now you gotta put the work in. Um,
Right.
so it was a good boost of confidence that this is the path that I should be taking. And
Mm.
not to say that that's what you need. All you really need is just the courage to put yourself out there in some capacity. Like I had the courage to post it on Instagram. And
Right.
that's really the reason why I'm still doing this and whatnot, because I had enough courage to kind of just
Just
put it in
put it
front of
out
some
there.
sort of audience.
Now, to paint the picture for the listeners, where were you living then? And of course, I know some things have changed, so this is a this is a setup question.
I was living in New York when
And
all
were you
that happened.
were you working already, or were you trying to figure out like where you were going to work and what you wanted to do?
I was still working, and I'm actually still working now. But it was sorry, there's a lot of dogs that I'm seeing right now. So if you hear me pause, it's because I'm a fanatic when it comes to dogs, and they're all very cute. So I'm just like, ooh, puppy. Okay, we're back. Sorry. So I was living in New York, and I was working in New York, and I actually
Mhm.
still work in New York now.
Mm.
Um, and the good thing about my job is that with my seniority, I have the flexibility to kind of ask the days off that I want. The
Mm.
schedule changes every month, but I know that I can always lock down having the weekends off.
Mm.
So I was working throughout the week, and then I was keeping the weekends to go to my studio space and work out of there. So it
Mm.
would be like work Monday through Friday, go to the studio like Friday night, be in the studio like Saturday, Sunday. So I knew like 3 days. So I really didn't have like free time essentially. I would have my boyfriend would pick me up from the studio. I would go to the studio like really early so that I can get out mid afternoon to still kind of have a life. um, but yeah, but it's you still have to. I still have to dedicate that time to
You
what I
do.
want to
Your
do,
passion. Yeah.
and I have to produce things. So I was doing that whole cycle, and then this year in March I moved to Savannah, and that was just due to cost of living in New York on my own,
Is it a
and
little
also
high
paying
in
for studio, a little,
New
it
York?
was the fact that my roommate wanted to like live on her own and like start her life there and whatnot,
Oh yeah.
and then I was just I don't have the money to live on my own. Like it's just
Yeah.
living
Even
yourself.
though New
It's a,
York is amazing,
yeah,
was it hard to leave it?
I mean it's my home too. It's where I was born and raised. So like New York to me is always gonna be with me.
Ah,
You know.
but if you were born and raised there, I feel like sometimes it's good to get away.
Yeah, and I've moved around here and there. I always just end up moving back to New York. So I know probably down the line I'm gonna move back to New York anyways. It's just who I am. It's just a pattern at this point. But paying for a studio and paying for an apartment in New York was just not, it wasn't happening. And it was like, you can't choose between living in a space to live in and then like having your studio, right? So I had to
Yeah.
give up something, and it was going to be the studio because
Right.
I needed to have a place to sleep and eat and take a bath at the end of the day.
Right.
And the studio was not going to give me that. Like my microwave in my corner wasn't gonna happen. So I gave up my studio in February, and I knew I was moving to Savannah in March, and I was still apprehensive about it because my parents live in Savannah, so I knew as far as like living costs went, I was gonna be okay.
Mm.
Like I'm still a very good daughter. Like I still pay for electric and all that stuff. Like I'm not gonna just at this point in my life, like I still have to be responsible. Um, so like I pay for what I have to pay, but at least I'm not paying rent every month.
Right.
Um,
It makes a
and
difference.
and it's, yeah, it really does. Like I am not ashamed to be like approaching my 30s and being with my parents right now because it's just saving me a lot of money. So, and plus my parents are great and cook very well. So I'm happy.
And it gives
And
you the opportunity to invest
yes, that's
in
what it
your
is. They're very
passion
much
and
like,
in yourself.
just like, yeah, take this opportunity to like save and know what you want to do and whatnot. They're not kicking me out, but they're also just be like, just be financially responsible while
Right.
you're here. And I'm like, okay. I mean, that's fair. I'm an adult. So I had found a studio space here in Savannah that was just, it just blew my mind because coming from a corner and finding like a 637 square foot space was a huge difference. So I was like, oh, okay. If I can be in this space, I can see myself actually like functioning out of Savannah because my whole thing was I can make work, I can make my friendships work, I can make my relationship work, all that stuff that was really important. I knew with the move was still going to be intact.
Mm-hmm.
My main concern was I just lost my space to create that I was looking for years. And
Yeah.
like now I have to give that up. So when I found this here in Savannah, I was like, oh my God, thank goodness. Because it was just so important to me. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
found the space and I locked it down, I was like, okay, like now I can be here. Like I can see myself moving here. I can see myself functioning out of the space. So I've been here for a little less than a month now. It's going to be a month on the 17th. And I'll have officially been here for a month and it's going great. It's definitely a change. It's a different scene is what it is.
Yeah.
But what I kind of like about it is that it allows me to dive a little bit more into the art services that I do because I do have my original paintings that I do, and that was very much when I was trying to cater to galleries and art collectors, and I'm still doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I've always just loved drawing portraits too, and so now I'm able to do commissions and do custom portraits and kind of cater to that part of myself as well, especially
Mm.
here. So it's allowed me to look at things more in a business perspective
Yeah.
and create things that I wouldn't have before. I always thought that, oh, if I do a reproduction in any way, like if I made a print or a sticker or like a pin, it would cheapen the value of like my original paintings. That was just some stigma I had in my head for the longest time. And now that I took the leap and did that, those are the things that people are enjoying and are able to take and use as a functional thing. And so I changed my mindset in the best of ways.
I'm curious, this past year, right? That's when you got your studio and you really started doing more art. And of course, the pandemic kind of made things weird and awkward for everyone because it's not like I'm assuming there was many gallery openings, especially in New York, because New York got hit the hardest during the height
Yeah.
of the pandemic. So, what did What did that income look like for you? Because, like you mentioned, doing some commissions, and of course, starting to think about doing like reproductions. But if there's like another artist who's at the beginning, like they just got their studio and they're like, "Yeah, Taffy, I just got my studio too." What should they be thinking about? Like, what are the different ways they could put themselves out there and sell and do art for people so they can make money?
Literally put yourself out there like everywhere in the case. So of course there's social media and then you can post as much as you want on Instagram and Twitter and the TikTok and all that kind of stuff. And I say the TikTok because that is not my generation and I'm still trying to figure out what the TikTok is. But because you're going to get different audiences from that in itself. One thing that I did that I think is the best thing I could have ever done was just go around to local businesses in the area. Especially with COVID, there's so many new businesses that are buying storefronts that are no longer around, and they're just as new as you are. So kind of just like going to them and learning a little bit about what their business is and letting them know that you're in the area and offering that like open door, kind of being like, oh, hey, I'm an artist. If you ever want art in your space, this is what I kind of do. Like, feel free to come by for a studio. People love studio visits. Like, if you show interest in what they're about and kind of give them an open door to find more about you, whether that's coming to your studio or whether that's redirect them to one of those social media pages. But I think face to face makes such a difference. People like connecting. And I know that it's hard during a pandemic, and especially people who are introverts, if you don't want to like talk to people, listen, I get it. A good way to kind of get around that is check the businesses that are around you and just send them an email. Just be like, hey, I saw your space, looking really nice. Give them a little compliment about what you saw and then introduce yourself a little bit. So that way you have that like computer wall, but you're still conveying like a message in a way. But yeah, definitely a way to just get people to you is to let people know that you're around. If you just sit here like in your studio space, you're just relying on someone who just happens to walk by. You got to let people know that you're here. But yeah, my top recommendation is just to just go around and let people know. And you just got to do it in a way that's the most comfortable to you and the most genuine to yourself at the end of the day.
It's funny for artists, like sometimes in talking to some artists, they're just like, when they think of a store, they're just thinking about, oh, I want my prints or my arts in a store. But they don't think about what you said is like all these new stores, like restaurants, hotels, all these businesses need stuff for their walls. And a lot of times, some of these are big businesses willing to pay big money to have like beautiful art on the wall too. And people can go there, introduce themselves, and might get 2 or 3 paintings purchased by these businesses that are now coming into the area, buying up all these storefronts.
Yeah, and local businesses love supporting other local businesses, especially any place that kind of has that like small store feel are always going to want to like protect that. So having a united front on it is definitely something that tends to be welcome. The only time they'll say no is really if they already have something planned for that wall, or if someone just happened to get their foot in before you, is really what it is. Like I had someone come in the other day, and I always ask people who come in, like, oh, like, are you from the area? Are you traveling? Because I just like to know who's visiting. You came all this way to like come into this space. Like, that's cool to me. So they were saying that they're local and they were just dropping off a mural design for a brewery that's opening up.
Ooh.
Right. And it's her, like sketches and whatnot with her. And I'm just like, yeah, see, like, I passed that brewery so many times and it was like coming soon. And it was just one of those, like, I contacted other businesses, but I never contacted, like, the brewery. In my mind, I just didn't think of it. I was just kind of like, oh, like, they're going to have beer everywhere. Like, they're not going to want it. And lo and behold, like, here she is. And she got the job. And, like, great for her. Like, she did the work. She got in. And, So you never know who is going to say yes. It can be any kind of business, honestly, at the end of the day. It
Yeah.
can be like the dog treat store down the block. It doesn't have to be a place that is typically meant for showcasing art. And sometimes the businesses themselves will be like, oh, sweet, thanks so much for thinking of us.
Yeah.
You know, so
And then it's interesting too because you've been painting for years, right? Like you were painting, it sounds like not only through high school, but you were probably drawing and painting even in elementary school, right?
a little bit.
Or
I kind of started more when I started when I was 13 because I had gotten diagnosed with diabetes and I was just in a hospital really bored. I
mm,
really wanted to play Nintendo 64, but because I was considered to be like the oldest kid in the pediatric unit, I never got the Nintendo 64. They were always like, "Oh, give it to the 5-year-old, give it to the 7-year. You don't give it to the teenager who." So I never got to. I just wanted to play Smash Brothers. Okay, I just wanted to play Smash Brothers and Mario Kart and like call it a day. But I never got the Nintendo 64. So the nurses would just give me pieces of paper and pen to pass the time, and
mm.
it was meant to be journal entries. But I'm a terrible writer. So that didn't happen. And I ended up drawing my Yu-Gi-Oh cards and like my Pokemon cards and just faces of people who kind of came in and out. And that's really when I started drawing. I drew out of boredom.
Mm.
And that's when my mom was like, "Oh, like there's something here." And then, you know.
Like these drawings aren't the like a chicken scratch that you normally
Yeah.
get off. There's a little something to these.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely having someone to believe in you is always a plus. But yeah, because they never gave me video games.
but that's good. That's clearly that was a good thing because it sparked all this. I only bring that up because even though maybe you really just started maybe having a art business the past year, you've been doing this for a while. And so on the
Yeah.
podcast a lot we talk about kind of valuing yourself and figuring out pricing. So even though yes, you just started last year, you still have some years of being an artist and so you still want to make sure you're charging your worth. So how are you able to figure out that pricing and get comfortable with charging what you're worth?
I'm I'm still figuring it out, to be honest with you. And I think you're always going to still be figuring it out because you have to constantly reevaluate where you are. And so the way I do it is I go based off of that first painting I sold at the gallery.
Mm.
So I priced that painting significantly low. And it was just one of those things that like, hey, I'm new, I just want to get it sold. I'm gonna just slap a price on it. And I think I sold it for $450, which honestly for that painting, it shouldn't have been that, but you learn. So now I know whatever I sell, excuse me, that's an original painting can never be below $450
Mm.
because it's like, hey, someone brought it for this price. Now it's in demand. Now I can slowly increase my price. Whatever I sell, I'll always price like a little bit higher. I'll do kind of like increments of like 50 or increments of 100, and then we'll counter in the supplies and the time that it takes to kind of do all those stuff. And as demand grows, my prices have to reflect that. So, because you can value yourself in a certain way based on your talent and the amount of work that you put in, but if no one is buying, then you're, then that's where you're at, you know?
Right.
That doesn't mean lower yourself. No, like never lower yourself. You just have to find the audience that is willing to pay that price point,
Mm-hmm.
and then only go higher. So that's what I recommend. Never go lower. If you see that you're not selling, that's fine. You may have to make some other things in different price points. Like for me, like I'll make stickers and I'll make pins that are lower because I still want people to invest in me somehow. And
Mm-hmm.
then people who are like buying a sticker now, maybe later down in the line, will have money and be like, oh, I really liked her art and now want to get a print. And then later on, now may want to get a painting. And people who buy your stuff at your lower price points earlier on are going to end up being your more like honored collectors because now it's like, oh, I discovered her when she was like at this
Right.
point. Now she's so high in demand, and now her paintings are like over $1,000, right? And
Yeah.
it's like now, now it also increases the value of what you sold at your lower price points earlier on in your art career as well.
Mm.
Because now that $450 painting that I sold, they were my first collector. And now I have my paintings are at the 800, 900 price point. I'm trying to break that 1,000 barrier.
You're
I'm
gonna
not
get there. You're gonna get there.
I'm gonna get there. I'm not in a rush, because at the end of the day, I still want to produce quality. I don't want to like just produce things to get money. I mean,
Yeah.
we all love getting paid, but you want to get paid for your worth too. So once like those get sold, then I'm like, okay, now I can go to the next kind of price point. So yeah, just I say find a price point that's comfortable for you,
Mm.
stick to it, and then just increase as your demand goes up and never go below. So,
I love that advice that you've given on pricing. And I mean, I think the bottom line is like value yourself, price what you're worth, and go up as you need to, right? And don't be afraid, and don't react when you don't get a sale, because people do that. Because I feel like as soon as I see somebody's prices go down, I'm like, ooh, ooh.
yeah, because now you're devaluing yourself. And now you're telling the
Exactly.
rest of the world that, hey, I wasn't worth this much before.
Yes.
Like, yeah, it speaks volumes. Even if you
Yeah.
don't hear feedback, it does. And another advice that I would give is, and this is something that I've been kind of getting into a little bit too, is that I've been looking back at a lot of my old works.
Mm.
And even so, I'm in a different place now and I have progressed differently. It's still it's still my art property. So I have like sketches from 2005, I think is the oldest one I'm looking at now. Yeah. So I have things from like 2005, 2008, and things like that I went ahead and framed and just showcased in a new light.
Mm.
And that's on my walls now. And even so, they're old, they're just presented in a new way. And now people are looking at that and being like, oh, like, how much are these? So something that you had like years ago that you forgot about is still value in a sense. I have sketchbooks that I'm now being told I should sell. And these are sketchbooks from, because I never finished a sketchbook all in the same time. Like I'll have things from early 2000s to like early 2010s and now from like 2020, and you can see the progression
Mm.
throughout those years in that sketchbook. And now that sketchbook is valuable because you're not only getting original artwork, you're also getting a sense of who I was throughout my entire art journey. You're getting my original ideas too. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's also another way of repurposing at the same time. Never forget like your old stuff is what I say,
Yeah.
because it can help you for your new stuff.
I
So
agree.
it's like,
100%.
oh, you wanna pay for that fancy expensive paint
Right.
from 2005. So it helps out, and you never know. Once people are invested in you, they want to know all they can about you. And
Mm-hmm.
definitely, you don't even like again, you don't really have to dive into it and talk much, but you can just show them where you've been essentially by just showing some old stuff, which I think is cool.
No, people
And
people eat it up.
yeah, like I'm so appreciative of my parents because they're the ones who saved all my old stuff, and I never did it. I was like, ooh, like I did that X amount of years ago. Like I'm so much better now. I don't want to see this. And once I kind of like was trying to fill out my space, I was kind of like, huh, sure, painting is my main thing, but painting's also not all I do. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I need to kind of show it's also a story too. Like I was telling you guys with the whole being in the hospital and then being in that art school that only spoke Mandarin and then being in Italy, like that's all a part of my story. And I have art pieces from those moments in my life And when you see that and when you hear the story and then when you see my art now, it all just connects.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also connects for me too. Like I had my very first painting I ever did. I hang it up. It is not for sale because when I am rich and famous and I become someone in this world,
Yeah, right.
then I can release that and be like, I have a name for myself.
$1 million.
$1 million. Not $1 million. So I mean, I hold that for like my private collection, but also just as a reminder of where I started and where I'm at today. So surround yourself with inspiration.
Okay, so one wrap up question is how do you stay organized? Any tips, software, techniques? How do you do all the things? How do you stay organized?
God, you guys are gonna laugh. I have so many apps that I don't use. I'm gonna be honest because I ask this question all the time to other artists as well, and I use apps and I'm just like, nah, this isn't for me. I am not a technical person when it comes down to it, and so I have just I have one huge calendar
Mm.
where it
Like a wall
has
calendar or just like a
a wall,
Gmail? A
like a
wall
wall
calendar. No,
calendar.
no, no, those are good. Yeah.
Wall calendar and like it has these little bullet points of like what I have to do within that day. And they're like just
Mm.
the bigger things that need to be accomplished. And I'm like, I need
Mm-hmm.
to get this done by this day. But every day at the start of my day, I take out like a notepad or a post-it note and I write every little thing that I have to do. But this is what helps me. So I'll even write like eat breakfast because sometimes I get so busy doing stuff that I forget to eat.
Oh,
So
wow.
I have to like remind myself like okay, and then I'll put like okay, this is the task I have to do, this is the task I have to do. I used to be very meticulous and I would write do this by this time just to kind of like keep myself there. But now I'm a little bit more loose with it. I just write the tasks that I have to do, and as long as I just get them done by the end of the day,
Mm.
then I'm like, okay. And I'm also realistic about it. I think you have
Mm.
to break your big goals and like your smaller goals because
Yeah.
you can't just write. For example, like I have an opening coming up in 7 days. I can't just write get ready for opening, right? And then be like do all those things.
Magical things will happen.
No. So like get ready for opening is the big goal that I'll write for my calendar like the day before the actual event, which means I have
Mm-hmm.
to be ready and wrapped up by then. But throughout this week, I have like little tasks that I do every day. I'll
Mm.
be like, oh, go to these shops and drop off your flyer, or make sure that like your chocolate is ready for the event. Make sure that the music's playlist is. So like I have reasonable things that I can tackle throughout the day that's gonna get me closer to that big goal. I feel like a lot of times people try to overextend themselves to get things done as quickly as possible. So be realistic, write it down wherever works for you. I like writing it physically because if I'm writing it, it's
Mm-hmm.
more like engraved in my mind. If I just type it really quickly and I leave it on an app, I feel like that's a one time thing and I'll kind of forget about it. And
Yeah.
I'm typically not always on my phone, especially since when I'm in the studio, I try to just
Oh,
do
yeah.
my work, So I'm not looking at it, and I hate notifications. I hate all that kind of stuff. So I don't like. I'm not gonna get anything that's like you said you were gonna do this like 15 minutes ago. Like what's going on? So I don't have accountability for myself when I use apps.
Mm.
But seeing it like on my table right now, I have a little square. I have a pen in my hand, and
Right.
I'm scratching off like the things as I go because it's all like a physical thing. So it's
Mm.
I use this pen to write that note, and I'll hold that pen with me. And it's I was supposed to scratch off something like what's next on my list.
Mm.
So it's just that's what works for me. Everything is going to work differently. It just depends on how
It's
your
like the
brain
person.
works.
Yeah. And what they'll
But
stick with, right?
yeah, but I feel like for me, if you can write something down, even if you put it somewhere else, it's just an affirmation that you have to get to it. Because now you physically see it out there in the world.
Mm.
So it's all right, like this has to be done. As far as getting organized, like space-wise, don't talk to me about that. Like, I'm constantly moving things. Like, I'm considered neat for an artist. A lot of people are like, wow, your space is really neat. But then if you look at like subdivisions of the space, that space is
There
not.
might be some piles.
Yeah, like I got what's it called? One of those like rollable storage bins that you typically use for the laundromat
Oh,
to
yeah.
like wheel around. I just got like one of those big things because I had a blue storage bin that just had a bunch of stuff in it. And I just didn't like the look of it. So I was like, oh, let me get like a bigger thing. And it's meant to look more organized. No, it's the same mess, but now you can't see it as much. It's just covered more.
Hey.
And presented in a nicer way, but it's the same exact mess. And now I can move the mess around because it's on wheels. But
but it works.
But it works. Yeah, just do you.
Yeah, it's what you can stick with. And people have heard that before because I love using Notion, but I've also used a bullet journal before because I like writing. Some people use notepads. I know a lot of people who use wall calendars in combination with stuff, and they even have some of those like fancy acrylic calendars where you could use markers and everything on it. But really it's just like what resonates with you and what you're going to stick with. Because if you're not looking at it every day, it's a wash.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard bullet journals are really, really good too, because like you said, you're like, that's another thing. Like you're physically writing down your way of organizing. So I think bullet journals are great. I just wish I had the patience for bullet journals because I would sit there trying to make it look all pretty.
Well, there's some hardcore that don't do any fancy stuff. It's literally writing task and that's it. I go the extra mile.
Yeah, I've seen some bullet journals which are like, oh, look at that cool like floral decal that you made like off in the corner. I'm like, I don't have the time to do this. Look at all the cute little like pens you got. I got these. I think what is this company called? For all you bullet journalists out there, I'm gonna drop a name real quick because I use it for something else, but I think it's meant for bullet journaling. If you go on their website, that's how they advertise the product. I think it's called Archer and Olive, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I am familiar with them.
Yeah.
They have beautiful journals.
They do. And so I got like their acrylic markers because I just wanted to not do line work with a brush. I was getting a little just impatient. So I just wanted like a good like dark fall tone colored like acrylic pens that just worked very well on multiple surfaces. And I really like the colors from Archer and Olive. But then when they show you the pictures of like how to use their products, it's like these are really cool like designs, bullet journals, and I'm like, well, that's pretty.
Yeah.
But
you're like, ain't gonna happen. Don't have time.
Ain't happen. But yes, but if you want really good journals and acrylic markers, Archer Olive is for you. Archer Olive, sponsored by.
I know, right? Right? They owe us a little something. And then before I ask you where the people can find you, you saying that made me think like people, because whenever you're listening to a podcast and you're like, ask them this, and you're like hoping they'll ask a question, and when they don't, you're like, dang it. But I'm sure the artists out there want to know, okay, do you have a couple of favorite supplies that you want to tell them about? So I have to ask that question real quick for my art nerds out there.
I do. I just gotta remember names.
Oh, I know, that's a hard one.
Okay, so for oil paints, and I'm sorry guys, but I love really high quality oil paints, and that's not the most cost efficient, but they're great. I really like Old Holland, and they have their paint tubes are really small, fortunately, but the quality of the paint is really great. If you can just afford like the one color I recommend is getting a flesh ochre, and then these are for people who like doing like a figurative works in portraits. It's just a really good tone. It's a really good like base tone to work other skin tones into.
Mm.
I know sometimes if you don't have the right yellow and the right red, sometimes your skin tones can look a little off. But I really do like Old Holland Flesh Ochre. I think it sets a really good kind of like tone for any skin tone, and then you just add in all the other colors to kind of go where you want to go from there. But that I recommend a lot. I'm getting into acrylics now, and I'm going into that whole Liquitex
Mm.
golden journey. I'm really enjoying the Liquitex Heavy Body because it gives this nice matte look to the paint, but it doesn't dry so quickly,
Mm.
which I like. It has this nice kind of like elasticity to it. And then if you're also getting into acrylics for the first time, or if you're switching from oil to acrylics, I know you usually it's the other way around. Oil, you kind of get used to mixing your paint mediums.
Mm.
And with acrylic, it's typically just water. If you like are still needing something just to have the fluidity more, I'm trying to take a look at what it's called. I have it in a gloss or a matte medium. And then those two will give that finishing look to the paint, but it will
Mm.
also help it like dry slower, or retarder is what it's called too. Will
Mm.
help. Those mediums I recommend with like acrylic paints. That's what I found to help me a lot. Other things I typically just like using, I love using linen canvases. If you're
Mm.
not stressed
Yeah, that
on
texture.
canvases, it really like colors just pop crazy off of it. And yeah, like just your canvas beforehand and whatnot, but certain colors that I use on like other canvases compared to gesso canvas, I'm just like, wow, like it's so bright.
Right.
And I guess it's because like linen is just a darker tone at the end of the day. So if you put a brighter
Oh,
color, that
yeah.
contrast is gonna pop off. But I've used oil and acrylic on linen canvases, and I just really like how my colors come off of it. I'm just kind
Mm.
of just like, oh, wow, like
Like, this looks good.
this is nice. And then the last product I would recommend using is anybody who likes inking, as far as just whether
Mhm.
if it's just like drawing or just inking out watercolor drawings or marker drawings or whatever, get yourself a Japanese brush ink pen. It
Mm.
just gives off a really cool texture. Depending on like how much pressure you add into it, you can get these like really definitive like thin lines. You can get
Mhm.
these wide strokes with a little bit of a stroke mark at the end, but it really gives character to whatever you apply it to. So yeah, linen canvases, Japanese brush ink pen, Old Holland oil paints, and a retarder or mediums for your acrylic paints.
All
That is my
right,
list.
folks, you heard it here. You heard it here. Well, please tell people like where they can find you, any events or anything that are coming up. So yeah, anything you want to share.
Best way to follow me is on Instagram, and my Instagram is lepouf_art, and it's spelled LEPOUF_art. That is the place where I just put a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, as well as works in progress. I put some sketchbook tours on there. But if you just really just want to know what's going on, that's the best place. I recommend people following me. If you don't have Instagram, I do sometimes post things on Twitter. I put more like what the new products in the gallery space are going to be on Twitter.
Mm.
And my Twitter, it's cutie pie to be envied. I made it when I was young. I just kept it. Don't judge me. To be envied wasn't available, so I put cutie pie attached to it. But it's spelled QTPIE, the number 2BNVD. I know that was like very lengthy, but altogether it's QT pie to be envied.
And I'll have the
Um,
links in the show notes too. Yeah.
it's so lengthy. And then two upcoming events that are happening, really exciting. So April 12th, so Monday, my website is launching, and it's guys, the website is just it's so good. And that's not me just trying to advertise it to you guys. It's just genuinely I feel like it's very much me. And on the website, it's my e-commerce site and also my portfolio site. So you can also catch up on what I'm doing in the blog that's going to be on the website there. If you join the email list, you'll also get 10% off your prints on any prints or paintings. I definitely recommend the email list because if you really want to know what's up, like that's where you gotta go. It'll also have everything that I sell here in the gallery space, and you also kind of can get a little bit about me and like my current collection as well. And then you can get my studio address on my Instagram page or on the website as well. And there's no like reservation required. If you're in the area, you can just stop by.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. And everybody, you know how this works. All the things will be in the show notes, the links to everything that Tafy has said. And thanks so much for sharing your story and your journey. Really appreciate it.
Oh, of course, at any time.
Well, folks, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Taffy, thanks again for coming on and sharing your story. I really, really appreciate it. And for those of you guys who want to support the podcast, remember you can go over to nachesnow.com and hit that shop button, and there's a whole bunch of goodies over there. Also, please rate the podcast 5 stars if you love this episode. And if you're on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. But wherever you are, please subscribe, share, what? Hey. And I will be chit chatting with you guys next week. It's going to be Nache and I again. And next week, we are going to be talking about people who inspire us. It was a really good episode, and I can't wait to find out who's on your list. All right, you guys, have a good week. Take care. Bye.